Well, today I'm joined by a very special guest, my good friend Gary Heavin. Many of you will recognize Gary from the Chasing Legends films that if you're a annual subscriber, I'm sure you've watched those films. Gary and I produced those films a few years ago. And also you'll recognize Gary from the Birthright conference in my members community in the catalog. Gary and I have known each other for, I don't know how many years, maybe 10 now, I think. And we've been on quite a few adventures together. And at some point, I'm going to have Gary back on just to talk about our adventures in Peru, because there are some wild things that happened when we were in Peru. And I definitely want to get into that. But today we're going to talk about something more serious than that. Gary, as many of you know, because I posted this the other day in the community forum, Gary just returned just a couple days ago from running search and rescue operations in his helicopter with his wife Diane in North Carolina in the wake of the devastating destruction of Hurricane Helene. Gary is a helicopter pilot. He also flies aircraft of all kinds, and he went down there and volunteered his time and his equipment to go and help in the search and rescue efforts. And obviously, you guys know Hurricane Helene has caused almost unprecedented destruction in North Carolina. It hit at the end of last month, and it made landfall in Florida and then barreled through Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And North Carolina was particularly hit hard due to catastrophic flooding. And so I want to talk to Gary today about his experience and for Gary to give us a briefing on what's happening, maybe clear up some rumors and speculation for us. So Gary, thanks for joining me. Why don't you just jump into it and into your experience and give us a brief on what you saw down there.
Okay, Tim. First of all, it's good to see you. Good to be talking with you. Kind of miss you a little bit.
Not too much.
I don't want your head to get any bigger, but I do miss you. So we flew the helicopter from Texas to North Carolina. Had to stop for fuel a couple of times. That's a 7.5-hour flight in a helicopter, which is a pretty good trip. We got there. It was amazing what we saw. I landed at Hickory Airport, North Carolina, which a group of civilians formed as the base for private helicopter. They named it Operation Airdrop. And so you had about 50 private helicopters there, all volunteers. And they set up an ops center where they were assigning missions. They set up a GoFundMe for fuel. And they raised over $500,000, which covered all the fuel costs.
That's awesome.
Completely private. And there were initially no military, no government aid. It was all private. And flying a helicopter is relatively safe unless you're in the mountains. And of course, we were in the mountains the whole time. So as long as your engine's running, you're okay. But if you lose your engine, you're probably going to die. It was not the safest place to be operating. But there were 50 helicopters and pilots saving people and bringing supplies, and without any FEMA, without any National Guard, and it was really a sight to behold. You'd be so proud of these Americans who took their time and their equipment and met the need. I was really honored to be part of it. Our mission initially, I got there on Tuesday, was to continue rescuing people that were isolated, and particularly the mountainous areas where roads had been washed out. And another factor was the winds. There were thousands of acres of giant trees that had just been bent over like matchsticks. And not only were they covering the roads, but they were on people's roofs. to tremendous destruction. And of course, down into the valleys where the rivers flow, the rivers came up to heights never seen before. And any homes that were along the river were destroyed. Any towns were simply washed away. My first mission was to go and rescue a young woman and her two children. And I landed on a riverbank in a destroyed community. And there were some rescue workers on the ground. And I asked where I could find this woman and her two children. And they said they had been washed away in the river, and they found the bodies of the two children, but not the woman. And I asked the age of the children, and they said they didn't know, but there were car seats in the car for them.
So were they in the vehicle when they got washed away?
I don't think so. I think they'd gotten out, but they seen a car with the car seats in it. So that's how they figured that out. So that was how the day began. It was
That's horrible,
terrible opening to the events that were going on. We had a mission with a number of objectives. We would take out food and water and medicine, and then we would bring back people that had medical needs or were stranded. And I was doing an average of 4 missions a day. During a 10-hour day, I would be in the air 7 hours. And as the week started to progress, Elon Musk donated 350 Starlinks. So we started delivering Starlinks to the fire stations. The fire stations became the center of all activity. And it was an amazing thing because these guys would accept the food and then they would distribute it. They were going at it on 4-wheel drive vehicles and buggies to retrieve people or to take sustenance out to them. And the Starlinks were critical because that was the first time they were actually able to communicate, because obviously no cell phones were working. And as we were flying over everything, the damage from the water was extraordinary. Houses were gone. You could see the foundations. This one fireman told me the story. He was in his fire station when the water started to come up, and he had to cut a hole in the roof to escape the flood and climb up the mountain. So that was a really neat base of operations out in the field. And for 3 days, I actually flew the state fire marshal. He's the politically appointed highest fire official in the state. And he and I actually became good friends. And we would go from fire station to fire station and find out what the needs were, take them Starlinks to open up communication. And that was a neat part of the experience because I got to see firsthand where the efforts were being expended. Not to mention having him there with a much higher level of knowledge. One of the interesting things that he told me, they're talking about a body count of less than 200. But he told me he personally knew of 1,000 bodies that had been put into cold storage. So you're going to see numbers of dead much, much higher than what's being reported right now.
Do you think that the people reporting this know that the death toll is in the thousands and they're being told not to report that? Or do you think that they just don't know yet? It's unknown to the media?
I don't think they know yet because there's no official report. This fire marshal, having communications with all fire departments, had a much better handle on what was really going on there. So I think it's going to come out. As we talk today, I want to quell some of the myths. There's a lot of myths out there too. And one of the myths were, yes, there were bodies in trees and bodies on the riverside, but nothing like what the rumor mill has been talking about. They had really retrieved most of the bodies that we think we're going to retrieve later in the week. And so it wasn't like they were abandoned. You've probably heard the rumor that Chimney Rock had a Fed meeting and told the citizens they weren't going to retrieve bodies and they were going to just bulldoze over them and they were going to take their land. Complete myth. Didn't happen. I went to Chimney Rock. And in another place, there were a group of citizens from Chimney Rock volunteering, and they had firsthand knowledge, so that didn't happen. One event that did happen was the day after the hurricane, a private helicopter went out to that area, and he had, and I met him and talked with him. He picked up an elderly woman and took her back, and it was either the fire chief of Chimney Rock or his captain who threatened to arrest the helicopter pilot for being there without authorization. And he said, well, the husband, the elderly husband is out there. I want to go pick him up and bring him back to join his wife. And the chief said, if you do that, we're going to arrest you. And so the rest of the story is they finally got to the guy, had him ford a river on a rope. This is an elderly gentleman, right? And 3 hours later, and then he had to climb a mountain and finally got back to his wife. When a 3-minute helicopter ride would have retrieved him safely. So, you had some local officials that got overcome with their power, but that was rare. But it did happen. I was almost arrested twice.
For what?
I have excellent hand-eye coordination. So for me to land a helicopter in a really small spot is something I do. So I did it twice in area where my wife was with me one of those trips, and she said, man, you got really chewed out. And I said, no, that was more of an ass chewing.
And for people who don't know, Gary ran these kind of search and rescue operations and delivering food to Haiti. When was that, Gary? What year was that in?
That was 2016. It was 2 weeks before the election between Trump and
Hillary.
Hillary.
Yeah.
And we were there 6 weeks. We were operating turbine aircraft that could land on goat fields, and rather than helicopters. And we would offload the food, and then we would load the wounded. And we were the only air rescue. It was not the mission of the military or the UN to do that, so we were doing it.
And that was in the aftermath of that huge earthquake, and it just absolutely reduced Haiti to rubble.
That was actually Hurricane Matthew.
Oh, that was a hurricane. That's right.
Yeah. I was there for the earthquake too. So I have a lot of experience doing triage in the field and transporting people and quite frankly, breaking rules.
Yes, and operating in very dangerous situations.
Yeah. So for me to get closer into the people, it wasn't risky for the people. I was being careful, but there was no reason to not get into places and abandon people because the landing was tight. So that's one of the landings. I tried to land in a parking lot of the fire station in Burnsville, North Carolina, and they waved me off. And I went around the corner and landed in a church parking lot. And I happened to have on board the state fire marshal over all fire stations in the state, and a senator, state senator, who happened to be a colonel in the National Guard. And so when I moved and repositioned, 5 squad cars came out of nowhere. I turned to the commissioner or to the state fire marshal, and I said, I think they're going to arrest me. And so he got out, went immediately to them, told them that there was a colonel on board. It was also a state senator, and they were delivering Starlinks to open up communication. And the police chief says, boy, that pilot's a badass. So instead of getting arrested, I just was a badass.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so the problem was you were trying to land in areas that were deemed to be too risky.
Well, that was a perception.
Yeah.
In a situation like we were landing in stuff in places, a normal pilot would have just, said no. But, we were there for a mission, and there's always a little risk associated with it. So it's part of the adventure. That's all it was. So let me quell a couple other myths. There's a lot of rumors that FEMA has been a problem. So let me tell you the reality, because I know firsthand. And remember, the base I was operating out of was the center for all helicopter activities. So what I didn't see firsthand, I heard from the other pilots. FEMA was worthless. They were worse than worthless. It's true they did eventually demand that all donations be sent to FEMA centers where they controlled it. And a good example is the Starlinks. Once FEMA got there, they confiscated all Starlinks. And then they put a requirement that a technician go with every helicopter that delivers the Starlink to set it up. Now, I have Starlinks. I'm not technically skilled, but even I can set up a Starlink in about 5 minutes. So that encumbrance was typical of government stuff. And then to make matters worse, they wouldn't give us the Starlinks. They were hoarding them. We ended up borrowing Starlinks from private citizens to get them out in the field to these fire stations because FEMA was hoarding them. And so between FEMA requiring all donations go to them and they control everything, including the Starlinks, there were a couple of reasons they did that. And I want to explain that to your members. One is they wanted credit. FEMA had no money available. And I know this firsthand. The FEMA director himself said that the funding was not available. Now, they denied on their website that it had gone to illegal alien support, but yes, it did. The emergency money that FEMA should have had available for this kind of situation was spent on illegal alien telephones, debit cards, and hotel rooms. And it's a good example of how the Biden administration is prioritizing its concern for the American people. We're somewhere well down the totem pole. The other thing that's interesting is anytime you're dealing with a bureaucratic organization or a corporate organization, as a businessman, as a CEO, I've had to work with the corporate culture from time to time. People in those environments are not results oriented. They're job preservation oriented. In other words, they're not going to make a decision that might put their job at risk. And so the people in need are paying the price for a bureaucratic culture. And we saw that so clearly with FEMA. Not only do they not want to make a decision, but they also are on power trips. They want to control things. And most of these people that work in these bureaucracies are idiots. And so we saw that firsthand. And kind of the message here is never depend on the government to come and help you.
Yeah, it's that famous Ronald Reagan quote, the most fearful words in the English language.
Seven words, yeah.
I'm
from the government,
words.
I'm here to help you.
I'm from the government, I'm here to help you.
Yeah, and that is true. Even Kamala, who I wouldn't have running a snow cone stand, these people are idiots. And I'm not being mean, I'm just stating the obvious. When has she ever made a payroll? When has she ever built a product? These people are idiots, and they're in charge. And so you see that throughout the whole bureaucratic government, and we're giving them our money and then expecting them to be available in times of need.
And they're giving billions of dollars to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And $750 to the victims of Helene.
Yeah. And guess what? The $750 is a loan.
Insult to injury.
it's a loan that is backed by your property. Yeah, it's just extraordinary.
It is extraordinary.
Yeah. So good lesson here, and I'm like you. I believe there's going to be difficult times coming. There's so many things on the shelf right now that they could utilize to maintain power, whether it's World War III, the way they're provoking Russia, whether it's a grid down situation. The World Economic Forum this month, any day now, is practicing what they call cyber polygon, a grid down situation, which could shut all the banks and food deliveries, whole thing. They're practicing it, which scares me because they practice COVID, right?
Yep.
And the financial situation of the country is also very concerning. So they've got these things on the shelf that would allow them to declare an emergency and suspend the elections. And I'm concerned that we're at a critical time because we've got a trigger event, which is the election, that they're not going to lose, even to the extent of not having it.
Let me return to a point real quick before we move on. Elon Musk, I don't know if you've been tracking with this, but Elon Musk has been posting, especially a couple of days ago, he was posting on X that his guys were being hindered in their attempts to deliver aid, including Starlink. But they were trying to deliver food, and they were in the air. And Musk was tweeting a lot, was whatever you call it, posting on X, and was very upset, incensed that FEMA was blocking the delivery of the aid. And it wasn't just for him. He was teaming up with apparently Musk and Trump were teaming up to deliver aid in North Carolina. And Ivanka Trump was on the ground, and they were. It seems to be, to me, a lot of the stories about the feds blocking the delivery of aid seem to be politically targeted and motivated. Like the last thing that the Biden administration wants right now is for the Musk-Trump team to look like the heroes in the aftermath of this disaster. So I don't have any doubt that they were blocking their aid. That's what they would. I think it was the optics of the thing that was concerning them more than anything else. I mean, Trump and Musk really were sending a lot of aid right after the hurricane, and I think that makes the Biden administration look incompetent and uncaring, and it makes Trump and Musk look like heroes. And I think that was a problem for them.
You just opened up a lot of territory there. Trump wrote a check for $1 million. Ivanka came to where I was, to the Ops Center at Hickory Airport. No photo of it, just telling people thank you and kindness. Really neat experience. I was out on an op when she came, but my crew chief personally spoke with her. I know firsthand that FEMA took the Starlinks and wouldn't distribute them. So I was having to fly around finding them. When people were getting their internet back on fire stations, we would go retrieve the Starlink and then take it somewhere else because FEMA wouldn't release them.
And that makes perfect sense, because as soon as people start getting communication back through Starlink, what do they think? Thank you, Elon Musk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Elon. Not thank you, Joe Biden. Thank you, Elon Musk. And I think that's what they didn't want.
It is. And I'll tell you a few other facts around that. The first time we saw the National Guard was probably 5 days after the event. And a couple of helicopters showed up. Now, keep in mind, there's 10,000 people that are isolated, a couple 100,000 people that have no water and no power. So you have this massive event going on, and 2 helicopters show up from the National Guard. And we were told, and remember the senator I was with is a colonel in the National Guard. So I got this really firsthand. the National Guard had no funding available. And the funding was the reason that they showed up so late. One side story, we had a nursing home with 20 people that needed to be evacuated, and two of them were in critical condition. And we had a Black Hawk helicopter sitting there on the ground. And we asked them, would you go there because this is an emergency? And they said, it is not our mission to pick up people. So the colonel's standing beside me, and he says, let me handle this. It was really cool to watch. And this colonel goes down here to this captain flying this Black Hawk helicopter, and within 10 minutes, the Black Hawk's on the way to rescue the people. And we actually went there because we didn't think the Black Hawk could handle all 20 people. And I took the nurse that was going to accompany the patients. So we were pretty involved in it. But the other reason, the governor of North Carolina, who's a Democrat, didn't order any of the state's resources for the first 5 days of the event. And so finally, after 5 days, we started seeing some government help from the state level. And remember, Fort Bragg, which has a massive fleet of aircraft, is 300 miles away, and no one from Fort Bragg was able to come. And they said because they were preparing to go to the Middle East with all of their equipment. So you have this disaster in the backyard. The other thing was Biden shows up in Asheville, and they declare what's called a TFR, temporary flight restricted zone. So suddenly, Biden, who shows up for a photo op, probably didn't even know where he was going, shuts the airspace down. And what's funny is you, in order to fly into TFR, you have to be issued a squawk code by the government. And I was the first in line. So I called Washington, D.C., which is what you're supposed to do. They didn't answer the phone. Long story short, after about an hour, I was the first person to get the special squawk code to fly through. But this idiot had shut down all rescue operations so he could go there for a photo op. So, you know, it's not that the government or these people were evil, that they did a lot of deliberate. They're just idiots that somehow have risen to the top of the power chain in this country. And their actions just were nothing but a nuisance. You know, even, and by the way, I want to mention this, the first stage of a disaster is this crisis stage where you're rescuing people, you know, from river bottoms and mountaintops and trying to save lives. And then you move into taking food and water to the people that don't have any resources, medicines. You know, you're getting the ill people back to the hospital. That crisis phase is over now. The main roads are all open. The roads up to the top of the mountain, the new heroes have come in, and it's the good old boys on mud buggies and side-by-sides with chainsaws.
Well, they call themselves the redneck Navy or something like that, the redneck
Well,
Army.
You're thinking of the Cajun Navy, right?
Yeah, the Cajun Navy, yeah.
Yeah, well, there weren't any coon asses there, but there were plenty of good old boys from the mountains of North Carolina, and I'm telling you, they were kicking ass. I spent a lot of time with them because as far as I could go and land, they were taking over, and I mean going up these mountaintops with chainsaws, going through the rivers, and they're now finishing their job, and that's going to be the end of the crisis phase of the event.
Yeah,
and with the roads open, food's now arriving via truck, and people are being able to drive out, and so we have this new stage, the second stage, which is kind of a maintenance stage. They still don't have electricity in a lot of places, still don't have water. So we're having to get the, you know, food and water and things like that and medical supplies. And this phase is probably going to last a couple of months. And then they're going to go into the long-term rebuilding phase. So people that want to donate right now, let me make a couple of recommendations. I wouldn't go there. I would, and I wouldn't necessarily send stuff. Stuff's available nearby, like in Statesville and Charlotte, and it's much easier to drive it in from there than it is across the country. Much more affordable. The Red Cross is not a good organization to donate to. I have had to work with the Red Cross in Haiti, other hurricane events, and they are they're just terrible to work with. And I may piss people off, but I know this firsthand. In fact, I went and looked at their financials this morning. You know, being a CEO of a $1 billion company, I know how to read financials. And out of their $3 billion a year organization, they only have 50 million attributed to domestic disasters, which is nothing. And you can see that on the ground. I'll give you an example. In Asheville, which has been completely destroyed, it's unbelievable to see, by the way. There are thousands of people that have lost their homes and no water, no electricity. The Red Cross has set up a center for people to go to, and it's for 200 people. 200. Now, the Samaritan's Purse, on the other hand, which happens to be based in Asheville, is kicking ass.
That's what I heard, yeah.
They've got sites set up for thousands of people. They've got teams in there that are clearing roads and making fresh water because the wells have all been contaminated. So I would donate to Samaritan's Purse, definitely not Red Cross, or to organizations that you know and trust that are on the ground there. But again, we're past the rescue phase. Everybody's got supplies now, and there's tons of it, and they need money to get them through the maintenance phase. Samaritan Purse is a great place to put it. And then we get into the rebuilding. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars to rebuild the roads, the bridges. I saw many bridges washed out. I lost count. That is going to be where the real money is going to count. And I don't expect anything from the government except confiscation of what we do personally or bottlenecking everything.
So I wonder, have you heard about there's some conspiracy theories floating around about something to do with mineral rights, and maybe somebody was either allowed this to happen, or even perhaps the hurricane was artificially generated. I mean, I know you know, and I know, and many of my listeners know, that we have the technology to manipulate the weather at this point, and so do the Chinese, and probably the Russians as well. So weather wars have been underway probably for a decade now, and I think a lot of the extreme weather that we've been seeing over the last decade, you know, the media attributes it to climate change, but in reality, I think what we're witnessing is weather warfare in a lot of these cases. What do you think about that? Do you think that this hurricane might have been artificially generated? There's some very strange things about it when you look at the map of the hurricane, the way that the epicenter of the hurricane, the way that it suddenly popped up out of nowhere. There's just all kinds of factoids about it that I don't have in front of me. But I always wonder when I see an event like this, was this the result of weather manipulation? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. And in fact, there's some significant evidence about what happened here. Dane Wigington, who I know you know is the expert on all this, and he did a video a night or so ago on watchdog.com. Let's see. Watchdog, is it? Am I getting it right? You know the one I'm talking about. I'd look it up right now. But anyway, you can Google Dane Whittington in his last few days where he did this video. And he has evidence of what happened. He has a map that shows the power generation that is visible and occurred just west of where this hurricane was coming through. And that power generation steered and concentrated the hurricane. You know, I saw with my own eyes thousands of acres of giant trees bowed over. This happened hundreds of miles inland after that hurricane would normally weakened. And so his depiction of the power generation that serves as steerage and concentration of the power, the force of the storm, you can see it with your own eyes. So yes, they certainly directed it and concentrated it to this area. Now, is there a political reason? Well, the Trump voters live in this mountainous area, as opposed to Raleigh, which is extremely liberal. Although Asheville is very liberal too, and it got the worst damage of all. But these people are not going to be able to vote. They're worried about finding a bottle of water and something to eat. The voting stations in most of these red areas are destroyed. So it's going to be very difficult. And remember, this is a swing state that Trump needs to win. They certainly have influenced the voting outcome as a consequence of the area that this thing went over.
That's if that was their strategy, I think it's backfiring on them, because the optics of this are not good for the Biden administration at all. They look incompetent and uncaring. And it's, as I said earlier, it's Trump and Musk who look like the heroes, who are swooping in. And in fact, I watched an exchange, and I'm sure many people did, on X. I follow Musk on X, and he was having an exchange with Pete Buttigieg, or however you say his name, Buttigieg, however you say his name. And during this exchange, Pete chimed in and said, "No, it's not true. FEMA is not blocking anybody and from delivering aid." And Musk is saying, "I literally have a pilot in the air right now with, aid and Starlink, and they're not allowing him to land." And Pete replied, "Well, you can give me a call if you have any concerns," something like this. And Elon Musk said, "I'll call you right now. Give me the number. DM it to me." And that was the last I think he heard from Pete. Yeah. So there's this. It's not looking good at all for Harris.
Today, the FEMA disaster communication director, it's a woman, shut down her social media. And it was a social media that contained the logo of FEMA. And by the way, it's illegal. She's the communication director. And she shuts down because she was not going to deal with the mass of angry people. And so that's illegal. It happened today. They have no desire to communicate with us, even if that's the title on their business card. So, let's talk about the election for a few minutes.
Okay. Let me pause for a moment, because I think this conversation we've had is so important. I'm probably going to post it to my YouTube channel and then put this portion of the conversation exclusive in the members community, because this part of the conversation we can't have on YouTube. So we'll probably reserve this part for the members community. So if you guys want to hear the rest of this conversation, if you're watching on YouTube, you want to hear the rest of this conversation, go over to the alberinoanalysis.com and subscribe, become a member, and you can watch the rest of this conversation over there and all of the other material, all the other content that I've been putting on in that community. My members community is awesome. You're going to see Gary and me in the film series that we produced. That's available to annual subscribers, as well as the conference material that I have on there and everything else. So, well, hey, Gary, thanks a lot for joining me, and I'm sure everyone's going to love this. And hopefully you'll come back and we can talk about some of our adventures in Peru. I know people want to hear some of those stories.
Okay. I'll look forward to it.
All right, Gary. Thank you so much. And hey, man, great job in North Carolina.
Thank you. I appreciate it.